says touch the perfection, or when Van is powered redefined, or we talk about the Van Heusen, like the people's car, it represents certain thing. When Nike, you see the shush and it says just do it. What does it represent? So it should be meaningful. In the case of Ray-Ban, the name itself is so it's built into the brand itself. So you got to understand that it should make some kind of a meaningful assessment in terms of interpretation by the people. It should be also it should be updated from time to time, because today we are in transient times. Today the brands which perhaps represented a particular line of business, this is very characteristic of certain products which have grown, for certain brands which have gone beyond the products which it represented at some point of time. So that today, if you see, they're almost like you can leverage on them as a kind of an envelope or kind of a family, or you can extend it. Something like Maggie, Lux, Dettol, they've all been able to extend that. So they should be able to update, looking into the various opportunities which come in the wake of new products which the brand is getting associated. From a corporate point of view, when you are diversifying into new businesses, something like, I can take the example of Airtel, for example, from Bharti Airtel Services, teleservices. Airtel, when it came up, it was only operational in the area of mobile services. But as time grew, they started going beyond in terms of the offerings. They've got e-wallets now, they've got DTH, they've got optic fibers. And as you expand, your logo should be, or your brand element should be able to accommodate that. If you look into Pepsi, Pepsi has also undergone a kind of a change. Starbucks again has undergone a change. Banks, over a period of time, they've been able to update according to the current times. So today, when you look into the brand of Airtel, today it encompasses a digital kind of a look, where it talks about maybe the convergence of the digital products which are there, which they are offering. So it makes it very, very broad. And obviously, from the changing times, you need to make your brand elements updatable, so they can update it from time to time. Second, it obviously needs to be memorable. The colors that are associated, the slogans that are associated, the motifs, the symbols, all signify a kind of a thing which people can always remember by. When you talk about open happiness in case of Coke, so are we talking about LG, as in the case given here, life is good, or we talk about fast track, which is be there. That means you're ensuring that the youth which they are targeting through fast track are saying that you have to be there. So every company has certain taglines with which they would like to make it memorable, easy to comprehend, and it can be transferable as you extend into multiple, as I was just talking about, that you should not be updatable. The logo should not be only looking into the progressive, but also looking into the flexibility in terms of that you are trying to bring into new elements into your offerings. Obviously, one of the key factors is that your brand elements have to be legally protected. It is, even in the last session we talked about it, that when we talked about the proprietary assets, it is one of the things which you are spending a lot of money, and it is almost like your identity, it is like your DNA. So obviously that identity has to be protected. Otherwise, competitors might come and they may copy it, and you could be caught napping. Sometimes the fonts that you use, the lettering that you use, and that can also be copied. So one has to be very careful about the kind of the brand element should be protected under some kind of a legal trademarks. They should also be differential. For example, in automobile, you are into different kind of product categories. So they should be able to differentiate into the multiple businesses that you are able to bring in. So you'll find under Mahindra and Mahindra, there are so many new products which have been coming. So is your brand element able to associate with that, so that it can be easily identifiable to the people? And of course, take a case of the Bata. The Bata still talks about that Bata written in red. So it is a very identifiable in terms of its brand elements. Going further, we must look into the process. How is branding defined? So right from the point of ideation of these brand elements, when you look into, as I told you, coming up with these brand elements is not that simple, but then trying to bring out those elements, associating with the products and attributes, and how in terms of what you are offering to the market is a daunting task. But then obviously that is what branding is all about, right? From ideating your brand elements, expanding it in terms of its opportunities in the minds of the customer, and also talking in terms of communicating to them in a manner which can identify, can resonate, and of course creating very unique differentiation from the competitors. All that would come under the concept of branding. So when we say branding, branding is a holistic kind of a situation. We also need, as I've told you, that the case, very good case example of Adani saying that brand elements also have to take into account the flexibility, kind of new opportunities that may come up in terms of a business expansion. I've already talked about the Airtel example. The same thing can be talked about Adani. Adani are trying to get into automobiles, so they would like to make their logos registered brand elements so that nobody can copy, and they can also expand. And as they enter into multiple businesses, you may have these brand elements representing them. Let's now move into what is the rationale for brand? Why companies are so much bent, or marketers are so hell bent on putting resources, money into investing into brands? Because brands today not only engage with customers, but if you look into the growth of the brand in terms of its value chain, it starts off with the consumer. You're talking about the marketing strategy that formulates, and then it engages with the consumer, with vis-a-vis your competitors, how you're differentiated, and the role of customer in assessing these brands, and further going down to enhancing the performance of these brands in terms of financial terms, and which links with the stakeholders. So there are various things which are captured, which are under the rationale for behind branding. So let's look at one few of them. First is obviously for identification, for the basic thing that it brings identification and brand association. We have already talked about these parameters in the previous session, but let's take a look at how are we affected by brands today and why people associate with brands on a day-to-day basis. Let's take a leaf out of our lives. Right from the time you get up, right, the timer is on the clock, so there's a brand which comes in. Right, when you go for brushing your teeth and you're having a cup of tea, again that's branded. The toothpaste, the toothbrush, then you go out for your walk maybe, right? So the shoes that you wear, and the kind of t-shirts or the track suits that you wear for your taking a morning walk, again those could be branded. There's accessories which are again from Adidas or whatever the brands that you could be using. Going forward, you will, when you come back, you have a breakfast. The breakfast would be, of course, nowadays we have branded breakfast in terms of Kellogg's and so on and so forth. Or you can have the branded atta, which is there for your for making parathas or upmas. There are ready-mix brands available where we can utilize them. Or you can be homemade. But then there is also an inclusion of brand there. Now, as you move to your office, you could be taking your car, your bike, or your any particular thing. Again, there comes an intervention of a brand, whichever vehicle you are talking about. Then you talk in terms of when you talk about your clothes that you wear for your formal, whether to a college, to a school, to office, to a business. Again, there could be multiple brands that you could be utilizing. Right, from your apparels to accessories to shades to multiple things, right? And as you go forward, you're coming back from your office or your school or your college. Obviously, again, you use those modes of transport, which are again brand specific. Of course, during the lunchtime, you would like to take a time out and have a dine out in a McDonald's or a KFC or whatever it is, or in a particular hotel, which again are branded. Coming back, when you're back to your home, you would like to change over to a casuals maybe. Again, you have brands. You go for an evening outing with it, or you go for a dinner with your family, and then of course once you come back, again you settle down. You may browse all throughout this. You are also utilizing your smartphone, which is again branded, right? So everywhere you will find that there is an association with some brand or the other for a particular job, for a particular utility that you have. So this have spread, and this has made brand so intrinsic part of our life, daily life. So one cannot ward off them. So we have to build around these associations that these brands are offered, and brands should make a difference to the customers, to the consumers. Obviously, when you're talking about identification, we always go for all that we have talked about in terms of what are the logos, what are the terms, what are the characters and symbols that you associate, what are the taglines that you are using, so that they can be easily identifiable and can achieve better identity in terms of their brand awareness, in terms of the top of the mind recall, or at the, if it is a top of the mind recall, it often relates to a better understanding of the people in terms of the next step of acquiring the brand. Coming to the next important thing of what, why brandings are necessary, is the protection. Suppose you are into your pharmaceutical company, you are getting into a new line of business, and you're coming up with a new chemical formulation. Obviously, you want that the copyright, the patent for that particular product process, right? You will find that many companies are, they always register their innovative products, because so that obviously they get an advantage in terms of the money that they have spent in developing those products, or those the innovated parameters of the product or the service, and of course get a kind of a protection of their innovatedness. And going forward, when you talk about the patents, once the patents are off, it is offered to the market. Obviously, you get paid for the royalty, right? So when you have patents and copyrights, for anybody who's using it, you get paid. So it kind of works as a barrier for the competitors also to not to easily copy and use your brand elements to promote themselves. You'll find that in very quick classic example that of when you are traveling, you might find that Britannia cakes, something similar looking like that, a cake, similarly looking, similar colors, they're positioned in the at such trap points that you would buy without even thinking twice, and but that becomes a problem. Protection of innovation also has got, like in case of the Mazda case. Mazda was with Distillery. It in 1993, when Coca-Cola was trying to re-enter the market, they acquired the brand Mazda, so the trademark also went to Mazda. But when Distillery, in 2008, when they went to Turkey, it was offered under the Mazda trademark. So Coca-Cola took it up as a legal case, and they filed in the court of law. And of course, the court had to step in, saying that Distillery cannot use the name Mazda trademark for their business interests, because it is an accepted name, because it is a name which is people identify with, or that culture is sensitive to. So there are limitations. So when you talk about the protection part, it gives you a lot of leverage in terms of you not being taken for a ride by the competitors in the marketplace. Let's look into the other aspects of why branding is essential. That is, we are looking into sustainability, which you see products pass through various stages. And I've told you in the introduction of the class today that under each brand, there could be multiple products. Earlier when it was talked about, yes, you try to brand a product and it goes through the different stages of the product life cycle. And of course, it leads to the introduction, growth, saturation, maturity, and then decline. And then ultimately, it may be phased out. It may become obsolete. But what about the brands that it represents? Kind of the money that you spend, should that will also die? So care has been taken to see that while the product is at a maturity stage, and when there is a opportunity for you to modify your products, you go for branding exercises or branding initiatives, where you can look into extending the brand across other product categories. So as a result, what happens? The product may come and go, but the brand life cycle still stays. And of course, the marketer can leverage on this brand as we go uh, into the future. So obviously, you must look into that. From sustainable point of view, brands are more sustainable than the maybe the products. Does it have a long-lasting value? Yes, brands. If you take a leaf out of Lux, right? We have been celebrating the 100 years of certain brands in the marketplace, and every year, whenever there is a review of, there are reports of the outstanding brands or the ratings of brands. These brands keep on coming back year and year. Some brands keep up the tempo in the top 10 brands across. They're more or less being consistent based on, of course, what kind of initiatives have been taken by the marketers to make the brand more visible in the marketplace in terms of the market share, should not meet their obligations in terms of the business goals, in terms of market shares, in terms of competitors being at bay, and you're able to bring in innovation into your products, and so on and so forth. So when you look into that, the brand definitely helps in engaging with a sustained effort for your business, and it gives a positive rub off so that you can leverage on it in the long run, and you can make better return on investments. Therefore, whether it's new or good or brands, if managed appropriately, it will endure. It will definitely stay with you for generations and serve you for generations. Hence, it makes sense for you to go for branding, because these are some of the very strong benefits that brands are associated with. Next, we shall move into a very, very important aspect of how do we build brands. So, in this, I will take the help of the Kevin Lane Keller's framework of strategic brand management, where he's talking about the various elements that goes into the brand building exercise. So as you can see here, there are some 6 facets or 6 building blocks on which the brand can be built on. So the first, obviously, some of them would be things which you already are aware of it. But we will go in a detailed manner so that you understand the kind of intricacies that are involved in making in building a brand today. So as you can see, the first one we will look into is the identity part. The identity part, as you can see here in parentheses, it's given as breadth and depth of brand awareness. We have already discussed that identity or a brand awareness is the critical part is the most important part in terms of the brand getting identification or getting some recognition. So when you talk about identity, how you're framing those brand elements, how are you communicating that, how effective has that been, would depend upon how much is the awareness. When you talk about awareness, we talk about things like brand recall and the brand identification, recognition, and the brand salience dimensions. So those become very critical at the point of purchase when you are trying to do, or whenever you are sending a referral to somebody, or you are trying to analyze about some kind of a future purchase, when you are trying to go for an evaluation of alternatives for your purchases. These things do come in terms of very critical analysis. So what are those? So let's look into the important aspect that are dealt with the identity construct. So as you can see here, this is basically a product category of passenger car. So when we talk about brand awareness, we look into creating an identity with respect to a product. And of course, we establish certain elements to talk about what it represents. But then into product category, whenever the brand elements are used to associate with the product categories, when we look into product categories, it could be very diverse. So where are we in terms of that, and what kind of elements we would like to associate with the product is what would be talking in terms of the depth of the brand. As you can see here, for the brands to be recognized, obviously brand elements help in identification. But what about as you go in terms of the depth of the brand? For example, under in passenger cars, there are different kind of cars. There could be compact cars, there could be SUVs, there could be compact SUVs, there could be sedans, there could be limousines, there could be wagons, and so on and so forth. So when you talk in terms of these categories of product, we as a marketer or as a product manager, as a brand manager, you have to define what is the kind of brand element that goes into each of these possible option product the categories which are there, right? So if you see under each of these product categories, further there is a sub division. Like in case of the SUV segment, they are further divided into crossover, mid-size, and compact crossover, and full size. So when you talk in terms of these variations, your brand elements also need to take care of that and help us in getting more depth in terms of the brand awareness. So when you talk in terms of the awareness depth, we would look into the product categories and what are the different product categories in terms of offerings that the firm is engaging into. Understand these are possibilities. The company may offer, may not offer. That's another thing. But when you look into the product category structure, you should be able to identify what is the depth of the brand awareness that is required so that the brand elements can be effectively identified with the opportunity. Suppose you're talking about a sports sedan. So a sports sedan should have certain elements. So when you are trying to build out those elements, you have to understand that in the product category of sedans, we are talking about for the sports. So what are the characteristics that the product should have that needs to be built into the brand elements? Similarly, if you go through this, you can always identify with respect to various product categories. This is with passenger cars. Let's look into a more something which we use in terms of groceries or the convenience goods like FMCG products like toothpastes. When it comes to toothpastes are of various types. Or when you talk about oral care, in fact, toothpastes are a part of oral care, but we talk about product categories within that is toothpaste is one. There could be tooth powder, there could be mouthwash, there could be gel, there could be sticks, and so on and so forth, right? So when you talk in terms of oral care, the product hierarchy gives you an assortment of various product properties which you need to get. So, but all are concerning to the one benefit of oral care. Now, if you look into the product hierarchy, the depth would be dependent upon under toothpaste, what are there? Under toothbrush, what are there? What are the options? So, when you get into that kind of a brand elements, you will be able to associate that what kind of brand elements should be devised to cater to the market. If you talk about Colgate, for example, Colgate is mostly associated, if you see the product hierarchy, there are multiple product categories that Colgate represents, but most of us represent that with the toothpaste because that's how the customer recalls the brand, because that's how has been the major product category that has contributed to the overall brand visibility. And over a period of time also, the company has also identified those as the major area of their offering that before diversifying into other product categories. Obviously, when you diversify into other product categories, it makes sense if you're attending to same level of the takeaways benefits, it makes sense to extend it. So here, when you talk about Colgate, because when you talk Colgate is representing oral care, getting into toothpaste and you're extending into toothbrushes and so on and so. The idea is the awareness over there helps to, increase the adoption of other product categories that it represents. So when you are extending the other product categories, it talks about the breadth of the brand awareness. Earlier we were talking about the depth within the toothpaste, that is the depth. When you're talking about across product opportunities or product categories, that is called the brand awareness depth. So is that clear to you? I hope it must have been clear that when you talk about identities, you have to create identities not only from the breadth, but also from the depth of the brand awareness, which basically is talking in terms of making your brand elements stand out in terms of your branding exercise to create identification, because this is the crux. Unless you are utilizing your brand elements to identify your brands, people will not recognize it. They will not be able to create any kind of recall factor. They will not be able to move further. So it is almost like coining the DNA of your brand. So moving next to the next thrust area is, of course, within the brand building blocks is the performance parameter. If you look into the brand performance, we look into multiple facets which are there, and we also look into the brand positioning. So when you talk about performance factors, what do we mean by that? The brands that you are offering, how is the brand performing in the marketplace? Does it meet the requirements of your target customers? Obviously, we have done that exercise while we are planning for the products and services, that we must look into, scope into what the needs and wants are. And then, of course, it leads to certain levels of product hierarchy, which you have to remember, the augmented part and the potential part. All that is part of the performance, because when you are not factoring that into your brands, obviously it cannot perform. So you have to understand the need assessment, the wants of the target customer, and then you look into how these products can be, the brands can be calibrated towards the needs. And of course, understand when you are offering these brands to the customers, customers are, as I told you, they buy the brands for various reasons, for utility, for utility or functionality, or for the emotional values. So those have to also to be taken into account while you are bringing in the performance parameters, because performance, like in case of how the product, how the brand is actually getting implemented or getting consumed. If it is a service bank, like a bank is giving services, how is that bank giving that service is going to be a critical part of the performance criteria. When it comes to tangible products, obviously what kind of quality standards, the way it is to be used, and of course the benefits that would accrue, would talk in terms of the brand performances. Going forward, we look into the brand positioning. Now, positioning as a concept, as you remember, is a very important part in the market strategy development. Because when we talk about the strategic part of the marketing, positioning plays a role of creating unique image in the minds of the people regarding the products and services which are being offered. It could be product, services, or a company, or an event, or whatever you are trying to offer to the marketplace. However, a positioning is good enough to create that image, but that image has to also to be corroborated by the actual worth of the product. Suppose I talk about a fairness cream. I said that, of course, fairness cream is considered to be a racist product these days, but then, of course, fair and handsome, you must have seen. It was considered fairness is something which is only the bastion of the women. They felt that why male cannot be looked into the fairness. So when you look into those kind of takeaways, there is a parameter of positioning that particular fairness in the minds of the people. But if that product is unable to deliver that goods or deliver the promise, then it would likely to fail. So you got to be very careful about that. The positioning that you make is something which is a very an intangible part, but it needs to be further experienced by the people so as to make any kind of an impact. So though the image is very, very critical, we should also support it with the performance dimensions. Coming to performance dimensions, the brand performance can be looked upon from various aspects. Like facets, the 5 facets that we talk about, as you can see it on the screen, we talk about reliability, serviceability, and durability of the product. I think it goes without saying that any product that you buy, if it is not reliable, serviceable, there are products which are very good, but then point is they are unable to make a mark in certain markets because they are not able to be serviceable. For example, in the case of Xiaomi's case is given, you can talk about automobiles, two-wheelers, those brands which are entering new into the market and or they are unable to establish their service backup centers or their spare parts availability is a concern, you will find that it may be very, very difficult for them to sustain in the marketplace, and then you may be forced to take a call in terms of whether they would be there or not. So in terms of, obviously, when the product has to be reliable, it has to consistently perform. That's a critical part. But apart from the performance, we need to, for it to perform consistently well, we need a service backup. Durability of the product, whatever your promises are you really delivering in terms of durability? So whenever you're talking in terms of durability, the brands should have a long lasting, the product should be long lasting, and should, whatever the promises that you are talking in terms of further duration it has. We are a market, India is a market where they give a lot of credence to the durability part, because they look into the cost factor, they also look at how long will it last. So that becomes an important consideration when you're looking into the brand performance. Second, we move into the services aspect of the brand, or the, when we're talking in terms of the pure service also. The effectiveness and empathy. While you must have seen your experiences as a consumer, if you have dealt with certain complaints like the AC has malfunction, has some problem has happened, or your washing machine is not performing, or your car is not manufacturing, it's not giving the right kind of work, or you are unable to use it, or it has broken down, you go to service centers. How the service is meted out is also part of branding, is also part of brand performance, because you may promise a lot of things in the advertisements, but if it is not properly given in terms of the effectiveness for the just taking care of the people, or having said, if my car has conked off, my car is broken down on the road, and I have put in money for a roadside assistance, and I call up the service station and say that, oh, it is already lunchtime, I cannot go and do it. Well, what does that speak of? The brand may be a great brand, but if it does not get delivered there, it does not look into the empathy that the provider has to bring in, obviously it will fall apart. And it's not just one shot that you're doing. Are you consistent? Even if you do a good job today, are you able to give the services for every time that the consumer is having a problem? Whenever there is a defect that has been worked out, or a complaint that has been registered. So in case of, in summers, ACs are, they snap off very easily. So, there are repair, people fall back on the service centers, but there could be inordinate delays. The response time could be very, very badly affected. So the effectiveness of the service is also a very critical part of your brand performance. Next, we move into the design and style. Obviously, today's consumers are more affected by what kind of the aesthetics aspect of the product, of the brand, in terms of color ranges, in terms of options, in terms of what makes sense in a given market, and what is the fashion quotient for people when they're talking, not only in terms of apparels, but in terms of the kind of products that they possess, the kind of house that they live in, the interior decor, everything. So the kind of paint that they use, the kind of car that they be using, the kind of wardrobes that they have inside the house, are they branded, and all that. All, when you talk about all these things, the design and the style becomes very, very critical. A case of IKEA is there, where they try to involve the consumer to a greater extent to satisfy them, looking into the design and style. They can build anything around the promise to the customer is that anything you want, we can give it to you at the lowest possible cost. And of course, the next part of the brand performance is the credentials of the offering. How credible is your brand that you are trying to offer? Obviously, you need support functions like warranties, guarantees. I've already talked about the patents, which talks about, for example, Volvo talks about safety. You must have seen in cars, safety is a very common thing, like airbags up to there. But will that airbag really trigger off? Will it really be a safe thing for them? So many people have thought twice about, okay, the airbags needs to be serviced also. Just having an airbag condition in your car does not mean that it is going to be operational. Many a times you'll find that your music system, for example, in the car is supported by so and so. What is the credibility of that? Today, when you buy a laptop, the Intel processor lends a lot of credibility to the offering in this marketplace. When you talk about example which has been mentioned here, from Mahindra and Mahindra Thar, it offers 4 to 4 ride. What does that 4 to 4 ride mean? It means that you can go to an adventurous trip, you can go off-roading, where the roads would not be very smooth and all that, and you can really use the 4x4 ride to maximum. So unless those credentials are proven, it will, again, the performance might get affected. Price, as you know, the premium that is associated with brands is what the customer is looking forward to. They will never question when it comes to paying the price. But when you're talking in terms of brand performances, if you really are able to give it at the right price, at the right value for the customer will always view the price versus the benefits, right? What they are getting. So most of the times you'll find that these price becomes a very critical factor in terms of when customers decide to buy. And of course, it is when you look into the pricing, when you buy branded stuff, good quality products, obviously it also sustains. Many times people may look at price for cheaper versions or cheaper brands, but then it also has a impact on the performance criteria. The example which has been shared here is a few products which have failed the safety test, are being, but are still have assumed the good position in certain markets in India. But internationally, they have failed certain quality tests. So why? Because the customers here are looking for value for money. They want to trade off a lower price variant in the marketplace. So that does not speak very volume about the performance guide. Whenever there is a premium associated with the price, obviously understand when you talk about the German technology in case of a car, we are paying price for the German technology, and the customer is well aware of that. And obviously that becomes a differentiator in terms of how the brand would perform. That's an expectation. Brand imagery, what kind of how customers perceive about the brand, and when they do, and when they see that, it's more of a intangible facet of the brand. So obviously, what kind of people are associated, what kind of non-marketing information like word of mouth, how people have used it, the testimonials, this can create, or the influencer groups which are involved in promoting the brand, have they used it, to what extent they are endorsing it. These are the factors which look into the brand imagery and try to ensure that, okay, if these people are using, they may have a positive rub off on in terms of the promise. So this is an intangible thing which people may experience or perceive while they are using the product or while they are using the brand. Values and personalities. Every brand has a human personality built into it. We have looked into Jennifer Acker's the five parameters, which we talk in terms of sincerity, excitement, competency, sophistication, rugged. These are some of the human values which has come out of the research, extensive research, which the brand manager or the brand manager can factor into their products and services that they are giving. Just to give you a feel that Royal Enfield example which has been given here gives a feeling of very rugged bike. When you talk about the Marlboro cigarettes, it talks about the machoism, right? When you talk about Raymond's as a brand, it talks about the complete man, a man who is complete in all sense. So that's a personality that they try to build up, and they try to humanize the brand so that people can associate with the brands better. Of course, the other factors which are critical are the heritage and the history of the brand. You'll find there are some brands which have done extremely well in the previous, they have a very good record. And a case in point would be that, your past experience has been very good. So that is also an indicator of the product performances. Coming to the buying and consuming settings, obviously, if you've seen the very good classic example of Amir Khan's Thanda Matlab Coca-Cola, it was done with the basically to introduce the product in a smaller. So, in what circumstances you are using, or when you're talking about, the, for example, occasion-based usage of a product. For example, raga. You're talking in terms of in which setting you're going to use it, what particular season, what particular occasion, right? So these commercials are built on a story where the brand says that okay, under these circumstances, what you should be there. Suppose you're going for a scuba diving, this is the brand of Titan that you should be wearing. So it talks in terms of the settings in which particular brands have to be used. Looking into the next is most important thing is the brand user imagery. User imagery talks in terms of the race, the gender, the income, who is going to use. Obviously, this gets in the target profiling. When you are seeing the ad, you know who it is meant for. Obviously, you get to sense as to what is the gender that they are looking into, or is it a unisex? Like United Colors of Benetton talks about unisex products, and of course, when you're talking about premium brands, you're talking about the income parameters of so obviously the user imagery tells you that if you go to these are the parameters which you look into the brand performance. Cadbury's has dealt with various age groups in terms of their who should be using, what kind of products should be used by whom, by the youngsters, the mature people, or the kids. Coming to the next most important part of the is the positioning part, where we talk in terms of the point of parity, point of differences, as well as the frame of references and brand mantra. These are the three things that you look into when you're talking in terms of creating the image, which is called the positioning. The concept of positioning has been devised by Al Rice and Jack Trout to create a distinct image in the minds of the people vis-a-vis your competitors. So the frame of reference is basically, for example, when you're talking about the two-wheelers, are you talking about bikes? Are you talking about scooters? Are you talking about, when you're talking about detergents, are you talking about high-priced? Are you talking detergent liquids? Are you talking about, the powder or soaps? That category is when you're talking about the frame of reference. So this is a very common point of reference that you talk about. Point of parity and point of differences, basically, when you're looking into, okay, in case of bikes, I'm looking into 250cc or a 350cc bike. That is a point of parity. But then when you get into differences, you have to weave the point of differences in terms of communicating it to the customer. So I may be dealing in the 350cc bike, but it is coming with a difference. So Enfield will have a different thing, Honda will have a different thing, Yamaha would have a different kind of point of differences. So the positioning is built on identifying the point of parity, because point of parity is those aspects which the consumers perceive that should be present in all the brands. So point of parity should be that it's a common point of reference for every brand. But when it comes to point of difference, that is where you can create unique brand associations with respect to your product and then make it available to the customers. And that's where the customer tries to identify with. See, just to give an example of your case of Bullet, Royal Enfield, it has the point of parity is that it should be rugged and all those pricey and all those things. But when it comes to the point of differences, the offloading that it has, the capacity it takes, right? It has to be taken care in terms of the point of differences and be captured in the kind of positioning that the brand is being promoted, of creating that image. So you'll find different models have a differentiation in terms of colors. They would talk about different names which have been come, like in case of they have come up with Himalayan, Interceptor, Scram, Meteor, Continental. Each one is unique in its own offering in creating differences in the minds of people. Brand mantra is 1 or 2, 3 words where you try to sum up what the brand stands for, right? So you say with respect to BMW, very classic example is the ultimate driving machine, right? the best the man can get, those kind of references which are being made. Uh, Bajaj, when they entered into 350 category, they talked about Hati Mat Palo, which means basically you are making a dig at a competitor that, okay, but the point is when you're talking about Hati, here Royal Enfield was touted to be, it had an image that it was not very quick and fast. It took to any kind of changes. But Bajaj portrayed that as a differentiating point while you're talking about it. So when they try to give this particular line, mantra, it brought out that difference very well in terms of what people wanted to associate with. Next, we move into the judgment. The brand judgments are made in the minds of the opinion of the customers. And of course, they looked upon, when you look into these parameters, they are built on the credibility of how credible they find that the brands are. So they will give you some ratings when you ask some surveys, or they say that, okay, we perceive this to be good, bad, ugly, on the basis of what kind of credibility the brand has. The better the brand image, the better is the credibility. Superiority obviously will find some unique attributes when they are using the product, while they're evaluating it, whether these superior brands are actually getting, because when you're talking about promising something in terms of your brands, they also find out whether it is a kind of really it is a superior or it's not a superior, right? Quality, of course, has a very positive disposition towards the brand. The more the quality that you pack in, the better is the kind of predisposition of the consumers towards the brand judgments. What kind of consideration that needs to be is given by the people while they're making the purchase. Like, for example, Nano had a good people appreciated it as a good idea, but when it comes to purchasing, they said no, because they appreciated the idea behind it, but when it comes to purchase, that did not have the right kind of state judgment in terms of the usability of the brand. Hence, perhaps it failed to register with the customers. Brand feelings: a person can feel happy, or may feel very cool with the kind of the usage of your brand, or they feel very secure by usage of those brands. So these are related to the various important aspects. I think a lot of examples have been shared in terms of, and brands have been able to bring out in their advertisements all these factors while trying to demonstrate it to the customers or to the consumers through their advertisements, right? So fun, coolness, warmth, security are few feelings, which are self-respect. When you talk in terms of, about social, the esteem factors of a person, because in Maslow's need hierarchy, your self-esteem is a very, very important aspect. So esteem needs can be looked upon while you are curating your communications to them. Social approval: if you are owning a brand, are you a kind of a person, like, for example, like in case of wedding, this is the brand that you should be wearing. If you're a high-end officer, a particular brand should be used by you. So these are again social approval, things that comes from cultural elements, the way the people consume in that particular market. So these are the feelings which are associated with the brand feelings. Then comes the question of brand resonance. If you talk about brand resonance, this is the ultimate linkage it's the last building block in the brand building exercise, which looks into creating a very strong connect with the consumer. So if all these building blocks, if you see, right from the identity to the feelings to the performance to the positioning, they engage with the customer at a different level. And as you move from identity to the brand resonance, the brand engages more with the taking the consumer into the fold. So more they engage, what they stand for, what are their feelings, what kind of emotions are coming. When you talk about judgment and feelings, it was mostly the emotions that they felt with the brands, with the usage of the brands. As a result, what happens? There's a strong connect that is you are able to establish. And when you look into the last building block, which is at the last but a very important part of the brand building exercise, that is called the resonance dimension. The resonance can be looked into from two parts. One is the intensity of the bond. That means how much does a brand buyer feel to have with the brand. Second is the magnitude of activities. So one is the how strong I feel about the brand. Secondly is the what kind of, because of that strong feeling, how much activities, what am I engaging when I'm using the brand? Am I engaging that? Am I taking talking good about it? Those kind of things are looked upon. So what are the things, the magnitude activities? It could be loyalty. That means I'm being loyal to the brand. I have something called customer lifetime value. I spread the good word of mouth to other people. As a result, the company can leverage more out of it. The If loyalty is not the only thing, we have to look into the attachment, the emotional cord that needs to be attached to a consumer's involvement in that product is also something which needs to be looked into when you look into the brand resonance dimension, right? It is kind of a loyalty may be okay. I've been using it; it may be coming as a compulsion, but then attachment is something which internally moves you to attach yourself with a brand, and it forms a very very personal bonding with the brand. Very difficult to achieve. Loyalty does not assure, but then yes, loyalty is a kind of a precursor for getting into the attachment part. The more you use it, the more usage you find it, the more involved you are, you will feel for that particular brand. These feeling can translate into community and engagement. You may create, like in case of Harley Davidson, there's something called HOG, Harley Owners Group. They have created a kind of a cult kind of group where people who are associated with the brand would like to form a community, and they have rituals, they have brand rituals, they have the brand feelings, very strong feelings, which basically they do activities, they have these parties, or they create some events, they do some kind of proactive things to participate in creating society level intervention to create more better CSR activity or to cater to a market, and thereby you are able to create better resonance dimensions. When it comes to engagement, I think engagement is the overall riding philosophy in terms of the brand. It moves the consumer to engage with the brand at a very strong level. The moment you reach these parameters in terms of the loyalty, the attachment, the community, the community comes from, again, the networking that you need to have among these people. Marketers can utilize this, leverage this to take the brand to a different level altogether. And today, when you are diversifying, it always makes sense that these brands will sustain and will get more acceptance. So just merely creating identity is not important, but going forward, offering the products, performing, the brand should perform what it stands for. It should also create better feelings with the consumers as you go across with the multiple usages, and thereby create a kind of a conviction among the buyers. And the last but not the least is the cord of attachment, which I call as a psychological attachment that you have in terms of matching the frequency of what the brand is endorsing, what the brand is communicating with your offerings, and what the consumer is going through. So when that becomes relevant, the involvement of the consumers becomes much higher, and they're able to observe the real benefit of what a resonance dimension is. And for the marketer, it's a win-win situation when you have a brand which resonates with your target consumers. So we have gone through today's session as to what is branding, why branding is necessary. We have looked into the various meanings and also looked into the building blocks of creating what brands stand for and what brand is basically in the brand exercise. How do we build from identity to the resonance dimensions? With this, we come to the end of this unit. Thank you for your time.